Hello everyone and welcome back to For StarCraft 2 Strategy. I am finally back after a few days hiatus, almost a week in fact. I just had a bit of a cold, but I'm feeling better. I think my voice is a little better now as well. So back into the strategy videos I go. Now today we're going to be taking a look at a Protoss strategy. In this particular replay, our Protoss player here is Kiwi Kaki, and our Zerg opponent is Idra. Now this is from the local MLG tournament. A lot of really great games, also a lot of really great strategies implemented in those games. So going to be taking a look at a lot of that probably within the next week. So again, this is a Protoss strategy. Now what we're going to be looking at as far as build order, pretty standard, a 4-gate. That's what we're going to be looking at as far as production buildings are concerned. 4-gate, pretty popular build, very solid, allows you to play very aggressively early on. But more in depth into that, along with the 4-gate, what we're going to be taking a look at is getting a Warp Prism and going for an Immortal drop. Now Immortal's very strong against armored units, also very strong against buildings. So Immortal drop is something that's pretty popular. A lot of players do it, and we've been seeing it a lot within the past couple months since the game was released. But along with the Immortal drop, we're going to be using the power of the Warp Prism, that ability to create that Pylon power, that little grid on the ground, and we're going to be using it to warp units into our opponent's base. So we're combining the power of a Immortal drop with the power of a 4-gate, and we're going to be using it to push in on our Zerg opponent early in the game. Now as you can see here, before I go back to the base and look at the build order, doing a little bit of harassment in the fact that we're stopping our Zerg opponent from fast expanding. Initially with our probe, and then following that up by dropping this Pylon here to block off any possible expansion. Something that can be very effective, especially since a lot of Zerg players like to expand early. Having your probe dance around there to prevent it, and then putting down the Pylon can be very effective. So let's go back into the base here and look with that starting build order. The beginning was pretty standard, starting off with a 9 Pylon, following it up with a 13 Gateway and a 14 Assimilator. Now that we are at about 18 supply, we're going to be dropping that Cybernetics Core as well, so pretty standard opening thus far. This is definitely something, though, I would definitely consider implementing this into your game against Zerg opponents. Again, a lot of Zerg players are very comfortable with that fast expansion, allowing them to work on their economy and get that extra larva. If you can prevent that by dropping a Pylon, even by a minute to 2 minutes, you can delay that. That's going to be very, very beneficial to you. It's also going to allow you to get up and go for this build here. Now, as you can see, this extractor does get stolen from us. Not too concerned, though, because in what we're going for, we can actually deal with just having one Assimilator, and we'll actually be okay with that. Now, that seems a little contradictory, especially considering I said that we're going to be getting a Warp Prism and Immortals. But beyond that point, a majority of what we're going to be warping in against our opponent isn't very gas intensive, so we'll be okay with that. We might have to pull back on any possible sentry production, since they do cost 100 Vespian each, but again, that's something that we should be okay with. Getting this Xel'Naga tower, always a good idea. Try to get that forward scouting so you can see any pushes coming out against you. I always suggest to everyone getting that Xel'Naga tower, if at all possible, in every single game. Again, extra vision is going to be very beneficial to you. As you can see, Zerg opponent poking up, trying to do a little bit of damage. Nothing doing, though, there. Now, as you can see at this point, we do have our Robotics Facility warping in. We started dropping that, or we did drop that at 23 supply. First thing we're going to do is go out with this Immortal. Now again, what I said that we're going to be going for is we're going to be going for that 4-gate along with an Immortal drop. Now as you can see, the Warp Gate research is coming in, and we basically started researching that the second that we dropped that Robotics Facility. So again, that was at 23 supply. So right now, just working on those resources, gathering the minerals, gathering the Vespian gas, going to kill this extractor as well. We don't want our opponent to get any additional vision in our base. Definitely trying to delay that as much as possible. As you can see, having some Zerglings at the back rocks here trying to destroy this. Gonna want to try to deal with that. Obviously, we don't want them to take down those rocks. Now, since there weren't a lot of Zerglings there, we could have brought down some Zealots to deal with them. Looks like he did pull away, though. The other option, of course, would be to warp in a Stalker as soon as you have that ability. And as you can see, that Warp Gate research just about done now. Excuse me for the cough. As you can see, I'm not fully over that sickness. Going to be warping in these 3 warp gates now as well. We dropped those 3 at 37 supply. We had enough resources to drop all 3 at once. So we went ahead and did so. And now a lot of times what you're going to want to do is, of course, get those gateways in before that warp gate research is done. But again, what we're going for here is we're going for this Warp Prism harassment. So we don't actually need to warp in units until the point or we don't need to mass warp in units until we have this warp prism in their base. So delaying these isn't going to be as big of a deal. Of course, they're going to be delayed because we've spent so many resources on this robotics facility, the warp prism, and the 2 immortals. We just won't have those resources early enough to put these down that early. But again, as you can see, moving out here with the warp prism, and our gateways are finally in, going to be changing those to warp gates instantaneously. And what we're going to be seeing next is that strategy of going for that immortal drop and warping in units simultaneously. Now, an important thing to note here is that in pushing out with this and warping in, you're going to have 2 big decisions. Now again, we're running off of 1 assimilator, so we don't have quite enough gas to support getting sentries. So we're going to be looking to warp in zealots and or stalkers. That decision is going to be based primarily on what you see your opponent getting. As you can see here, in this particular game, the Zerg opponent did have a lot of Zerglings, so zealots would of course be the answer. If we saw a lot of roaches, then you'd want to throw some stalkers into the mix as well, because stalkers will do pretty well against roaches. And again, basically what we're going to be looking to do is just cause as much harassment as possible. Use that pylon power from this warp prism to warp in units in your opponent's base and push forward, pick off buildings. An important thing to note is you want to try to make sure you don't get this immortal surrounded by those Zerglings. Try to protect the immortal with the zealots. You can see the good example of Micro here, pulling those zealots close to the immortal so that they can shield it from those Zerglings. Definitely something I would suggest doing, because you're going to want the immortal to pick off any of the roaches, also to help picking off these buildings here. You can see that again here, the Zerg opponent trying to move those Zerglings around to get to that immortal, but we're just using this meat shield in the zealots to prevent that from happening. Also at this point, we are comfortable in moving our warp prism closer, because the only thing we'd have to worry about at this point of the game is that queen, and the queen obviously isn't going to be going anywhere near this warp prism with all these zealots here. So pushing forward, doing as much damage as possible. As you can see, staying zealot heavy, and this decision is based off the fact that he was going for mostly Zerglings. Now we can see there are a few roaches here, and if you wanted at this point, feel free to warp in some stalkers to deal with that. If he starts to go roach heavy when he sees all your zealots, I mean, that's the real advantage of having this pylon power right inside of his base, is you can just switch your army composition on the fly just like that. Only takes a matter of seconds. All you have to do is wait for the next the warp gate cooldown to finish and warp in around the stalkers, and it's basically that simple. And as you can see, absolutely devastating the amount of damage done here. His economy completely shattered, and Idra does go ahead and call good game. So yeah guys, what we looked at here, standard in the fact that our production buildings were pretty basic in that 4-gate. The 4-gate is a very solid build, but mixing it up by going for these immortals very early on, getting this robotics facility, going for those immortals, and then getting that warp prism. And then of course utilizing the power of that warp prism, having that proxy pylon power in a mobile unit, having it anywhere in your opponent's base, and allowing you to warp in units inside of their base, switch up your army composition to properly deal with theirs. This can be a very powerful build. So let's go ahead and take a look at that build order once more. What we saw here was a 9 pylon followed by a 13 gateway. Shortly after that, we're going to get 14 assimilator and then an 18 cybernetics core. And now once that cybernetics core is done at 23 supply, we're going to be getting a robotics facility and immediately also start researching our warp gate research. And then at a 37 supply, slightly delayed because of the fact that we're spending a lot of resources in those 2 immortals and in that warp prism. At 37 supply, we are going to be getting these 3 gateways, and then once those are up, of course, turn those into warp gates. In moving in your opponent's base here, what we're going to be doing is warping in units, dropping those immortals, and trying to do as much damage as possible. So once again guys, this has been for StarCraft 2 strategy. If you guys like our videos and you like what we're doing here, then please do go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. And take advantage of that. Use your units as they should be. Keep the zealots in the front. Use the sentries to force field and or guardian shield, and then target fire the sentries with the immortals if he happens to have a few zealots mixed in there as well. You want to use all of your units to their most effective, so that they're most effective.